Self-development with tactics.
So, I'm gonna go ahead with Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and once again I'm not gonna say Zarathustra all the time, I'm gonna say Zara, for the purpose of being faster and, not having to say such difficult words all the time. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead with part 3, speeches 1 to 8, and the first one apparently is the Wanderer. Part 3 opens a short while after Zara has left his disciples. He's venturing over a mountain ridge, echoing the previous part's theme of ascension to get to the ports of the other side of the Blessed Isles. He plans to take a ship to cross the sea. Zara reflects on his nature as a wanderer and a traveler, and on the quote-unquote last peak that stands before him now. The one thing that must be mastered to reach his ultimate goal of the Overman is his own self. Zara is now alone and he knows he must ascend beyond all things, quote-unquote. As Zara reaches the summit of the mountain, he gazes out over the sea and says that he is ready, quote-unquote, to descend into the pain and suffering that must accompany his final ascension. As he descends to the sea, he realizes that his great folly is his love of humanity. Love is the danger of the loneliest one, he says. Zara knows that he must overcome his desire to love the disciples he has left behind if he is to finally ascend and become the Overman. The opening speeches that make up this chapter set the stage for the hardship that Zara will have to face in part 3. In the end of part 2, Zara identifies his love and enchantment of humanity as the thing that ultimately holds him back from his destiny. This chapter gives Zara time to reflect on that weakness as he journeys into loneliness and despair. What is going on? On the vision and the riddle. Zara joins a ship that has come from far away and wants to go still farther. For the first 2 days of his journey, Zara refuses to speak to anyone on the ship because he is still so overcome with sadness. Yet, because he is a friend of all who make distant journeys and do not like to live without danger, he speaks. Finally, the ice of his heart is broken. He tells the sailors a riddle that has come to him as a vision of the loneliest one. Zara tells his disciples of a dwarf who has accompanied Zara on his journey. The dwarf makes him by saying that even though he has tried to ascend to the greatest heights, he must now fall like a stone. Zara eventually summons the courage to confront the dwarf. This courage, he says, is the pride of humanity because the human being is the most courageous animal, quote-unquote. Courage is the best slayer, he says. It can even slay death. As Zara confronts the dwarf, it hops down from his shoulder. They find themselves standing before a gateway. The gateway is marked, quote-unquote, moment. And there are 2 paths that have contradictory makings. They both claim to lead to an eternity. Zara gives the dwarf a conundrum of time. Must not whatever can already have passed this way before, must not whatever can happen already have happened, been done, passed by before? This riddle is a presentation of Zara's teaching of the eternal return, the moment when the self accounts for and overcomes the restrictions of time. His teaching here is purposefully enigmatic because he wants the sailors to use their imagination to guess about whom Zara is talking. Time is the great riddle. Both he and his listener must reckon with the concept of eternal time in order to achieve an eternal return. Later speeches will bring this riddle to light. The next speech is on unwilling bliss. Zara continues to travel across the sea with bitterness in his heart until the afternoon of the 4th day. In that afternoon, he begins to enjoy being alone, remembering the time when he first found his disciples and taught them. This memory makes his heart happy. He knows now that he is going away from his disciples in order to complete himself. Such an act is actually an act of love for his disciples. Zara is also overcoming his need for having disciples. Up to this point, his desire has been to teach others because of his love for mankind. Now he realizes he must cultivate himself. Zara then compares his disciples to trees that must be replanted in order to stand on their own. This is what his journey will eventually accomplish. In part 1, Zara knows his disciples must betray him in order to grow. Now he sees a future time in which his disciples will be able to stand with him. As the sun begins to set, Zara knows his disciples are sad because of his imminent departure. He wishes that the happiness of the afternoon will leave him and enter his disciples. As night falls, Zara waits for sadness to overcome him, but it never does. Zara is again able to reflect. He ponders the signs that led to him to leave his disciples, and he thinks about his imprudent love for them that caused him to stay with them for so long. Now that he has found the strength to leave his disciples, his next feat of strength is to accomplish the task of overcoming himself, a task that he calls something still greater, quote unquote. Before sunrise, which is the next speech. Like the previous speech, Night Song, this speech reveals something elemental about Zara's teaching. While Night Song relates Zara's teaching on envy, Before Sunrise outlines his godlike desires. As Zara looks into the sky at twilight, he uses religious language to speak of his desires for transcendence. He ascribes to the sky a kind of divinity. Here, Zara begins to understand the silence, quote-unquote, of the heavens and promises to emulate such silence. The sky's beauty is what gives the sky its power. Zara is coming to understand himself as he is coming to understand the nature of the sky. He rejects the old notions of toiling underneath the sky. Instead, he embraces the sky as a divine presence and as a giver of life. Again, Zara curses the scholars by comparing them to the clouds that strain, quote-unquote, the sky. These people, quote-unquote, who learned neither to bless nor to curse wholeheartedly, rob Zara of his infinite yes and amen, or amen. Zara is seeking that which is beyond the middling values of this world, beyond such constructs as good and evil. Zara is now free to bask in his happiness. Free to bask in his happiness. He seeks to baptize the world with his knowledge and with his eternal return. Zara is on a journey to become like the heavens. He wants to become a being who is not governed by external reason or rationality. Zara is seeking not to be responsible to any being higher than himself. On virtue that makes small. By the way, the other one feels very stoic. He wants to become a being who is not governed by external reason or rationality. On virtue that makes small. Zara returns to his homeland, but instead of immediately venturing back to his mountain, he decides to stay and learn what had transpired among human beings. He wants to find out if human beings have become bigger or smaller. He sees a row of houses and he marvels at what they mean. He determines that during his absence, human beings have become smaller. He then begins a speech on the virtue that makes humanity small. In his speech, Zara says that humanity is becoming smaller because of the teachings about happiness and virtue. These teachings are actually impediments to the true teaching of Zara. They are an obstacle to anyone who is in a hurry to become the overman. The people do not forgive Zara for shunning the ideas of virtue. The people envy the freedom that Zara has attained. Humanity clings to the modern teachings of virtue. Zara hypothesizes, or whatever you pronounce it, because it wants to preserve comfort and prosperity. This has made humanity cowardly. It has taken away the courage needed to face death. During the second part of the speech, Zara mocks those that look down on him. The people, he says, are amazed to find that he has not become like other prophets to give them the same old teachings or praise them for their virtue. They do not understand that he is standing on a precipice of a new age. I guess. He taunts the people by telling them that he is the godless one. He is not like the other prophets because his message is not about virtue or morality. He taunts them because they have not progressed. They have become smaller, quote unquote. Zara finishes by telling the people that he is an example of his own message and that the hour of his ultimate ascension is near. This speech is a recognition that the old teachings of Christian virtue and modern philosophy's teachings of the self have failed to adequately advance the human race. Zara, partly seeking to shock humanity into hearing his message, and partly trying to offend those he sees as below him, castises the people. Like John the Baptist, he announces the coming of a new age. Zara will eventually eclipse these people, and they will see the ultimate state of humanity, which is, as you might know, the Overman. On the Mount of Olives. I like olives. Olives are great. This speech is a song for the season of winter, a season to which Zara compares his own state. Winter, he says, is a hard-hearted state, a state full of silence that kills those who wish to make noise. Winter is an introverted season, encouraging a silent state that Zara has come to love ever since the speech before sunrise. Zara sits in a market during the winter and practices this new state of being. He is talkative with the people, but only in a way that allows them to pity him while he keeps silent about the great secrets he holds. Zara does not let his soul conceal anything, yet neither does he completely withdraw from the people. Let them hear me chatter and Sigh, S-I-G-H, I never ever know how to pronounce it, from winter cold, he says, all these wretched, leering rascals around me. With such sing and chattering, I still escape their heated rooms. Zara is learning to temper his love of humanity while learning to live among men. Zara says that the winter is the perfect metaphor for such a state. Or metaphor, I'm sorry. It is a frigid season that repels people and causes their silence. It is a death-like season, yet the cold must also necessarily live among the people, in their villages and in their marketplaces. Like Zara, the cold is a state that the people cannot avoid. On passing by. After wandering among the people, Zara comes to the gates of the big city, quote unquote. There, at the gates, is a man who is supposedly a disciple of Zara. This disciple tries to imitate Zara's teachings. Zara stops to listen to the man and his words to resemble Zara's teachings in some way. The man curses the city and mocks its citizens for their decadence and their low spirit. The man implores his listener to spit on this city and to look down upon it. The people call his teacher Zara's ape because he imitates Zara's words, yet his teaching is incomplete. While he mocks the city, he has no vision for what is next, for what is higher. Zara looks at the city, and though he feels disgust and contempt for it, he gives the quote-unquote ape a piece of advice. Where one can no longer laugh, there one should pass by. This speech shows how Zara's teaching has been distorted in the public realm. The people mock this ape, quote-unquote, as they mock Zara, but Zara is angry with this man. Though he echoes some of Zara's words, he does not comprehend the ultimate sacrifice that is becoming the Overman. Zara's teachings to pass by shows that his own teaching has matured. Though he still despises the city just as this false disciple does, he no longer feels the need to condemn it publicly. Instead, he feels he can pass by the city as well as the fool who purports to be his disciple, which I think, by the way, is a very great lesson, Even though something might be bothering you and you might be hating something or disliking something, you don't necessarily have to, shout it around. You don't have to tell it to people. You don't have to write about it. You don't have to say anything about it, which is something that I've seen really also help me to, maybe not be angry all the time and be in a peaceful state quite always, because there certainly are some things that are bothering me, and there certainly are some things that I wish to be maybe different to some degree. On the other hand, maybe also not, but this is a different topic. But in the end, there is no purpose in talking about it too much, also writing about it. Anyway, on apostates. I don't know what, or apostates? Let's see. After 50 years, dissenter, heretic, nonconformist, defector, deserter, traitor. In On Apostates, or whatever you pronounce it, Sarah deals with those who have tried to learn from him during his journey. Perhaps driven to such a speech by the fool teacher in the previous chapter, Sarah gives a speech differentiating between those who follow him and those who are truly his disciples. The first kind of person, Sarah says, listens to his teaching at first, but then crawls back to the cross of traditional teachings and virtue when difficulty arises. For these people, the pressure and the temptation to embrace the old teaching is simply too much to bear. If a person follows his teaching, Sarah says, this person will also experience the hardship that he himself has had to go through. And those who waver cannot truly be called his disciples. In the second part of the speech, Sarah speaks directly to those faltering disciples. He mocks them for their lack of courage. They want to believe in his teaching, but they also want to believe in the teaching of Christianity and hold on to the hope that there is a God. Sarah tells them that this is not the way. He predicts that a dark night is coming that will blacken the old ways of thinking. This is the threat of nihilism, of which Sarah has been dreaming. Only through his teaching will anyone be able to escape such a fate, yet Sarah does not give hope to those who do not embrace his teaching. This speech is the last speech that Sarah makes to man before he retreats into his solitude. It is a warning of the onset of the dark night of nihilism that Sarah predicts will overtake the land. This event will ultimately kill God, just as in previous centuries the old gods of the Greeks were killed by the belief in one God, but Sarah is not hopeful that anyone who clings to the old virtues and values will survive. At the end of this speech, Sarah retreats from the town of the Motley Cow and travels towards his mountain home. And this is the end of speeches 1 to 8 from chapter or part 3. Gonna see you next time. Please stay safe and healthy. Take care of yourself and the people around you, the people that you love. Gonna see you next time. Bye bye.